Have you ever paused at the threshold of your own home, maybe after a really difficult day, and just felt that physical weight lift?
Oh, absolutely.
That perfect sigh of relief as you drop your bag? We often think of home as purely utilitarian, walls, a roof, a place to sleep, but the reality is so much more profound. What is really happening in that moment of transition?
It's one of the deepest human experiences, isn't it?
Uh,
The home is so much more than a structure. It's a psychological blueprint, a stage for our cultural negotiations, and a deeply complex system that molds our routines, our identities, and even our biology.
And that's our mission today. We are taking a comprehensive deep dive into the architecture of self. We've pulled material that explores the hidden history, the philosophy, and the surprising psychology embedded in every single room.
hmm
From the primal hearth of the kitchen to the invisible electrical infrastructure powering the walls, our goal is to extract the key insights your house is offering about how you live and really who you are.
And we've distilled these insights from multiple sources that look at the meaning of individual spaces. We're talking sociology, history, environmental psychology, all under this overarching theme of how to live.
That's a big question.
It's a huge question. And to keep this complex territory navigable, we'll be framing our journey around four foundational metaphors that define how we relate to the space we inhabit.
Okay, let's unpack these four essential frames now so we can use them throughout the dive. The first is home as a sanctuary.
Right, a place of absolute safety and emotional refuge.
The second is home as a stage where we perform our social roles and manage our public identity.
Then you have home as a mirror, reflecting our inner lives, our deferred memories, and all our subconscious clutter.
And finally, home as a system.
The complex, invisible infrastructure of utilities we rely on every single second.
So our deep dive will move from that foundational need for dwelling through the intimate private rooms, then to the social hubs, and finally we'll examine those hidden infrastructure systems.
Get ready to look at your kitchen, your closet, and even the plumbing beneath your floors with entirely new, informed eyes. Let's start at the very beginning. The fundamental, almost existential need for home.
When we talk about the psychological need for home, it starts simply. If we reference Maslow's hierarchy of needs, shelter is right there at the base.
The absolute foundation.
Yeah, fundamental to pure physical survival. But the sources show that the definition shifts almost instantly.
It does. While keeping the rain out is obviously essential, home rapidly becomes synonymous with safety. But not just physical safety.
You mean emotional safety?
Exactly. It's the place where the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for the fear response, can finally stand down. It's the secure base from which you venture out into the world, knowing you have a place to retreat to where you can regulate your emotions.
That transition from just survival to security, and then from security to belonging, that feels critical. Home is where we build those enduring relationships, whether it's with family or close friends, and it's the primary arena for connection.
This is where that idea of the obligation to belong comes into sharp focus. The American poet Robert Frost, he captured this perfectly when he wrote, "Home is the place where when you have to go there, they have to take you in."
I love that quote.
It's a beautifully simple sentiment, but it speaks to this deep-seated human need for unconditional acceptance.
Which means the home provides a kind of psychological continuity, doesn't it? It anchors our personal narrative. It's where the rules of the outside world are suspended, and we are accepted, warts and all.
Precisely. And that sense of safety and belonging becomes intensely associated with the physical structure itself. This is the domain of environmental psychology, specifically the concept of sense of place.
So it's not just the people.
No, it's not just the people. That's why we don't just feel an attachment to family, but to the specific intersection of walls, light, and, the geometry of a room.
It's the sensory cues that make those connections so indelible. I know the sources highlighted how certain smells, the scent of specific spices or wood polish, or even cut grass, can instantly trigger these powerful memories and nostalgia.
Well, the olfactory system is uniquely wired directly into the limbic system, which manages memory and emotion.
Right.
So a specific smell can transport you back decades faster and more completely than a visual cue can. It's why a home can act as a reservoir of emotional energy. For instance, the smell of fresh linen might be a direct link to a feeling of childhood security and unconditional comfort.
But I suppose if the place held difficult memories, those same cues could trigger anxiety or trauma just as powerfully.
That's a critical point.
The home is an honest archive of all feelings, positive and negative.
It is. The space itself is neutral, but the experiences recorded within it define whether it functions as a sanctuary or something, well, something closer to a psychological cage. When that sense of place is disrupted, say, through frequent moving or displacement, it can profoundly destabilize your identity.
Which brings us to cultural negotiation. In a world defined by movement and globalization, the definition of home gets incredibly complicated if you feel a connection to more than one culture.
That tension is a fascinating driver of domestic design. For immigrants, the act of settling involves deliberately importing elements of the original home into the new environment.
How so?
It might be specific colors, the placement of an ancestral altar, certain fabrics, or most commonly, the deliberate use of ingredients and cooking styles that recreate that original sensory landscape.
So they aren't just decorating, they are building a vital psychological bridge. They are consciously blending the old self with the new self, using the home as a sort of mixing bowl.
It allows for the maintenance of a hyphenated identity. If you identify as both, say, Moroccan and French, your home becomes a complex negotiation zone.
Yeah.
The design choices, blending a traditional layout with minimalist European furniture or strictly observing cultural dietary laws while hosting a very Western dinner party, these are constant, active blending rituals performed within the four walls.
Okay, let's unpack this philosophically because it elevates the conversation beyond just, interior design. We're talking about being.
Indeed. Martin Heidegger explored this in depth. He posited that dwelling, or Wohnen in German, is not merely having shelter, but a fundamental way of being human.
So not just living in a place.
No. He saw modern society as focusing too much on building on construction rather than dwelling, which is authentically inhabiting and caring for the world around us. True dwelling, for Heidegger, means making a meaningful reciprocal connection with the space and the objects within it.
So it's about authentic presence. If you just live in a house without caring for it, without making it truly your own, you're not dwelling. You're just existing in a structure.
Exactly. And then you have Gaston Bachelard, who took this philosophical lens right into the physical architecture in The Poetics of Space. He treated the house as a human psyche made manifest.
I found his analysis of verticality fascinating. He argued that the intimate, often forgotten parts of a house, the attic and the cellar, act as direct metaphors for our inner lives and consciousness.
Bachelard viewed the attic as the space of elevated ideals, deferred dreams, and clear memory, often dusty and quiet, holding things we've put away but still value.
And the cellar.
The cellar, conversely, represents the deep subconscious, dark, hidden, the site of primal fears and buried memories, the things we rarely visit.
The house literally serves as a shell for our consciousness, structuring our sense of self. It's a powerful metaphor that brings us back to our frames. That sense of memory in inner life connects strongly to home as a mirror, while the feeling of safety is home as a sanctuary. We're going to use those frames now as we look inside the specific rooms, starting with the most private space of all.
The inner sanctum.
We begin with the most intimate of all spaces, the bedroom. It's the room where we spend, a third of our lives? Yet we often reduce its function down to just a place for sleep.
Psychologically, the bedroom is paramount. It's often the only truly private zone, making it a crucial component of home as a sanctuary. It is the place to regulate emotions, deal with stress, and process the immense amount of stimulation we receive every day.
For adolescents especially, the bedroom transforms into a laboratory for identity formation. It's where they can experiment with self-expression without parental or social surveillance.
That function is captured beautifully in a qualitative study where teens were journaling about their rooms. One quote noted, "We decorate the walls to mirror what we're trying to become."
That's powerful.
It is. The objects, the posters, the music, the messy arrangements, they're all external signals of a developing internal landscape. The room is acting as a mirror.
And central to this room is, of course, sleep. We're talking about memory consolidation, emotional reprocessing, cellular repair, immune system calibration. It's the biological foundation for functioning, and the bedroom is the architecture supporting it.
And the science on the ideal sleep environment is incredibly specific. Our circadian rhythms, our internal 24-hour clocks, are acutely sensitive to light, temperature, sound, and comfort.
Everyone knows about blue light disruption now, but it's worth reiterating why it matters so much.
It really is. Even a small amount of blue light from screens suppresses melatonin production, delaying the onset of sleep and fundamentally disrupting that whole repair process. The light pollution within our own homes is a massive modern health problem.
And temperature is a non-negotiable factor in this biological architecture.
Absolutely. Research consistently shows that the optimal temperature range for initiating and maintaining deep sleep is cool between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 15 to 19 Celsius.
That's cooler than most people would think.
It is. We need that slight drop in core body temperature to signal the body it's time to rest.
Here's where the history gets really intriguing. The sources note that the bedroom, historically, functioned as both a cradle and a coffin.
That phrase reflects a time before widespread hospitalization. The bedroom was the site of the most major life events: birth, prolonged illness, intimacy, and death. It was a space saturated with ritual and family presence. It was profoundly sacred in a way that our modern, functionally specialized bedroom is not.
That leads to the fascinating historical shift in privacy. Contrast the medieval communal sleeping arrangements, where whole families or even households slept together on straw mattresses.
For warmth and security.
Right, out of necessity, with the highly private, singular bedroom that emerged during the industrial era.
The transition to the private bedroom was strictly linked to class, hygiene, and the rise of the nuclear family. Privacy itself became a status symbol, and we see that etched into the language we still use.
You mean like master bedroom?
Exactly. The term master bedroom, which was initially used in architectural plans to designate the largest, best positioned, and most heavily furnished room belonging to the head of the household, reinforcing status and hierarchy.
That's a great example of architecture reflecting power dynamics, which begs the question, is the private individual bed ideal, the universal norm?
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
The sources highlight fascinating global variations. Take Japan, for instance. The use of futons on tatami mats allows for incredible spatial flexibility.
So the bedroom isn't always a bedroom.
Right. It's a bedroom only at night. During the day, the bedding is stored away, and the room serves as living space or a dining area. This reflects a different cultural value for space saving and multifunctionality.
Or the Nordic solution to shared intimacy and personal boundaries.
Right. Nordic couples often share a bed frame, but use two separate duvets, which sounds simple, but it represents a highly conscious respect for individual comfort and bodily autonomy, even within the closest relationship.
So they're sharing a space, but not fighting over the covers.
Basically,
Yeah.
they are sharing a space while simultaneously preserving the integrity of their own sleep environment. It just shows how the bedroom is always a negotiated space.
Moving from the sanctuary of the bedroom, we arrive at the bathroom, a space that demands we be meticulous about hygiene, yet simultaneously forces us to confront the undeniable, messy realities of the human body.
It's the ultimate space of duality, which makes it perfect for anthropological analysis. We should probably start with cleanliness, which, as the sources emphasize through Mary Douglas's work, is not an objective state. It's a cultural agreement.
I recall her definition. Dirt is matter out of place. It's all about context. A clump of hair on your head is fine. A clump of hair in the shower drain is dirt that must be purged.
And historically, this concept of cleanliness was tied deeply to moral purity and social hierarchy, separating the civilized from the unclean. The bathroom is where we perform the rituals required to maintain that social agreement.
So it's a site of meticulous self-discipline.
Yes, the grooming, the self-management, applying a public face, but it is also the space that accepts the raw, unfiltered biological processes.
It's where the curated public image dissolves. It manages the sweating, the bleeding, the waste, the aspects of self we spend the rest of our time carefully concealing. That tension between control and chaos is immense.
This is why the bathroom can be a private setting for immense vulnerability, emotional crisis, body shame, or simply the exhaustion of keeping up appearances. It's a space that sees you at your least guarded, reflecting who you truly are before you step onto the stage of the rest of the house.
The bathroom is also a monument to engineering that we take completely for granted. It's difficult to overstate the triumph of modern plumbing.
Its history is turbulent. Yes, sophisticated systems existed in the ancient world, the extensive sewer systems of Rome, the drainage of the Indus Valley civilization, but the European Middle Ages were notoriously unsanitary. Waste disposal was haphazard, often ending up in streets and rivers.
The sources single out the revolutionary impact of the modern flush toilet and comprehensive sewer systems on public health.
The pivotal moment in the UK was arguably London's Great Stink of 1858.
The Great Stink.
Yes, a hot summer exacerbated the stench from the River Thames, which was basically an open sewer, and it brought sewage-borne diseases to a head. This crisis galvanized public health reform, leading to Joseph Bazalgette's massive modern sewer system.
And that infrastructure was fundamental.
It was fundamental in eradicating diseases like cholera and dramatically increasing life expectancy across the developed world.
It's fascinating how a purely functional necessity can drive such monumental societal change. So, what happens when we jump forward to modern design? We've moved from sheer necessity to the spa-inspired aesthetic. You know, marble heated floors, elaborate tubs.
That focus on the aesthetic ideal, the curated, perfect self-care stage we see on social media, is a very modern phenomenon. It uses the bathroom to project wealth and calm. However, this aesthetic stands in stark contrast to global reality.
And the tragic reality of sanitation access worldwide is a sobering reminder of that privilege.
Over 3.5 billion people globally still lack access to safely managed sanitation. The consequences are dire. Widespread disease, environmental contamination, and critically safety and education issues for women and girls who often cannot attend school or are exposed to danger when seeking private facilities.
So our gleaming white tiles and eucalyptus bundles.
They represent immense resource and infrastructural privilege.
The final powerful psychological point about the bathroom is its unique status as often the only space in the house with a lock. This makes it crucial for privacy.
Anthropologically, this is where Victor Turner's concept of the liminal space applies perfectly. A liminal space is a threshold, a transition zone between two defined states. In this case, between the public self and the inner self, between clean and dirty.
So it's a space where rituals happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rituals of purification, self-inventory, and renewal.
So it's not just a room, it's a process.
Precisely. For someone exploring a fluid or queer identity, or for anyone needing intense emotional refuge, the locked bathroom often represents the only moment of guaranteed, unvarnished authenticity. It's a vital, temporary sanctuary that allows the resident to step out of the stage for a moment and simply be.
If the inner sanctum is about managing the self, the next set of rooms is where we manage our relationships and our social roles. Let's pivot to the most communal space of all, the kitchen.
The kitchen is the original center of settlement. The history of humans gathering around fire dates back over 1 million years. The hearth was the gravitational center of the home, intrinsically tied to survival, security, and community.
That deep primal association is why proverbs like, "He who tends the fire tends the family," resonate across continents. Even the ancient Roman worship of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, emphasized the spiritual significance of the controlled flame.
And that history is clearly reflected in the technological evolution. We moved from open fire pits that filled the entire dwelling with smoke
Incredibly inefficient.
and unhealthy,
Yeah.
then to clay or stone ovens, to the first true game changer in domestic life, the cast iron stove.
The cast iron stove, which became widespread in the 19th century, was revolutionary because it offered control. It enclosed the fire, regulated heat, and dramatically improved indoor air quality. That led directly to the gas range, and today, the modern induction cooktop, which prioritizes safety, precision, and efficiency.
But those technological leaps bring modern dilemmas. A very current debate centers on the environmental and health impacts of gas stoves. Recent studies have highlighted the concern over indoor air pollution, specifically nitrogen dioxide or NO2 emissions.
And that can affect your health.
It can exacerbate respiratory issues, particularly in small, poorly ventilated apartments.
It forces us to balance tradition. I mean, so many chefs prefer the precision of a gas flame against modern health data. But setting aside utility, the kitchen acts as a living archive.
It's where culture is practiced and archived. Family recipes are rituals passed down, binding generations together. Food itself tells stories of global migration.
Like the tomato.
Exactly. Think of how the tomato, a New World fruit, completely transformed Italian cuisine after the Columbian Exchange. Or the chili pepper, which originated in the Americas but is now fundamental to the identity of Thai, Indian, and Szechuan cooking.
I find the psychology of cooking so compelling. The act of repetitive preparation, the chopping, the kneading, can be profoundly meditative, a necessary counterpoint to the mental chaos of modern life.
And the social side is backed by hard science. Shared meals and shared food preparation are known to release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, strengthening family and communal ties. Cooking for others is one of the clearest acts of service, a universal love language.
The spiritual significance also cannot be overlooked. For many religious traditions, the kitchen is sacred ground.
Absolutely. The strict rules of kosher observance in Judaism, which dictate the separation of meat and dairy preparation and require specific cleansing rituals, transform the kitchen into a space of profound spiritual discipline. Similarly, halal guidelines in Islam dictate preparation methods and ingredients, ensuring food aligns with theological principles.
The kitchen is also defined by how it adapts during societal stress. During WWII, the kitchen spurred self-sufficiency with victory gardens. During the Depression, it was a site of resourceful scarcity.
And most recently, during the early stages of the pandemic, we saw the kitchen become the heart of resilience, manifested by the intense, widespread sourdough baking trend.
Everyone was baking sourdough.
Everyone was. It was both meditative and practical. But this trend existed alongside persistent kitchen inequality, where millions lacked the space, time, or resources to engage in such domestic pursuits.
Let's talk about the architectural evolution. We went from the functional 1950s work triangle, that rigid Taylorist model optimizing efficiency between the sink, stove, and fridge, to the widespread modern open concept kitchen.
The work triangle was literally about treating the kitchen as a domestic factory floor. The open concept, which arose later, was intended to be sociable, integrating the cook into the social fabric of the home. But critics have pointed out the downside.
The surveillance kitchen critique. Tell us more about that.
It argues that for the person historically, often the woman doing the bulk of the domestic labor, being constantly visible blurs necessary boundaries. The cook is permanently on stage, subjected to the gaze of guests or family while performing unpaid labor.
So it's a performance.
It can be, yeah. It pressures the cook to manage social interaction and culinary precision simultaneously, potentially turning a meditative act into a forced performance.
And this touches on the gendered history of the kitchen.
Historically, yes, the kitchen was largely a woman's domain, often linked to confinement and invisibility. While modern roles are far more inclusive today, the politics of domestic labor, who plans the meals, who does the daily cleanup, still reveal and reinforce existing power dynamics within the household.
If the kitchen is creation, the dining room is the formal setting for the resulting social stage. Dining rituals have always been inextricably linked to displaying status and hierarchy.
That's evident throughout history. You compare the Roman triclinium, where guests reclined in a specific order that subtly signaled rank, to the medieval Great Hall, where seating on a raised dais was a clear, visual display of authority. Proximity to the head table was a direct proxy for social status.
And the way the meal was served also evolved to reflect changing social structure.
Right. We contrast service à la française, where all dishes were placed on the table simultaneously, emphasizing spectacle, abundance, and the host's wealth, with the 19th century innovation, service à la russe.
Service à la russe, the modern sequential course service, shifted the focus completely.
It removed the collective display and emphasized the individual guest's experience, providing hot food plated beautifully. This system reflected the rise of the bourgeois class, prioritizing refined individual taste over feudal spectacle. It's the norm we follow today.
And Margaret Visser's philosophy argues that these pervasive dining rituals are what elevate eating from mere biological necessity to a profound social event.
Exactly. Take the simple common rule, don't take the last piece. It's not just a sign of politeness, it's a subtle, unspoken agreement symbolizing communal consideration. It reinforces the value of the group over individual desire. The absence of this ritual during a tense meal signals distress or disregard.
Even the architecture of the table influences interaction. We know the geometry of the table subtly influences perceived power.
Round tables inherently suggest equality and collaboration, channeling the mythology of King Arthur's fellowship. In contrast, a long rectangular table naturally establishes a visual hierarchy, concentrating authority at the head and foot. If you want harmonious discussion, choose a round table. If you want deference, choose a long one.
Despite all this history and ritual, the tradition of the shared family meal is under threat in modern society, isn't it?
It is. Studies link the decline in shared family meals to potentially poorer adolescent outcomes. Conversely, regular shared meals are strongly correlated with positive cognitive benefits, better academic performance, and lower rates of anxiety and depression in children. This suggests the dining room's social function is far more critical than we realize.
So even if the formal dining room is becoming an anachronism, often used only for holidays, the act of gathering to eat remains vital. It really highlights the room as a central stage for hospitality theater, the performance of hosting.
Hosting requires immense emotional and physical labor. It's an act of crafting an event, projecting a curated image of domestic perfection. This pressure, when sustained, can be exhausting, reinforcing the idea that the dining room is truly a high-stakes stage.
Now for the rooms dedicated to downtime, which have undergone constant evolution. We started with the formal Victorian parlor, purely for show, dedicated to receiving guests and displaying wealth, often closed off from the family's private life.
That formalism gave way to the living room in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a slightly more relaxed space. But the real shift came post-WWII with the rise of the family room, a space centered not on guests, but on the newly available technology, the television.
The living room, therefore, acts as a mirror of the zeitgeist. It's constantly absorbing technology. The 50s brought the TV. The 80s demanded space for massive VCRs and stereo systems. Today, it's a decentralized streaming and gaming hub, always adapting to how we consume content.
These rooms are truly an emotional stage. They host both public performance, displaying our social aspirations through art, furniture and book choices, and private, unscripted life.
The loud arguments, the emotional meltdowns, or the major life announcements.
Exactly.
That dual function requires us to acknowledge that dedicated leisure space is inherently a luxury. For millions globally, one room must serve all purposes: kitchen, bedroom, living room.
Taking time for non-productive time is indeed a privilege of space and resources. But the sources highlight the psychological necessity of this space. For marginalized groups, for example, having a soft couch or quiet zone where they are not performing, where they can simply exist without scrutiny, can be a form of freedom, a radical, necessary act of self-preservation.
And the physical layout, the furniture itself, becomes the architecture of leisure.
Consider the difference between a traditional sofa facing a fireplace, encouraging intimate, direct conversation, versus a sprawling sectional sofa pointed at a massive screen. The furniture dictates the interaction. The sectional often encourages parallel, multitasking activity. Someone scrolling, someone watching, someone working together, but not necessarily interacting deeply.
This speaks to the need for adaptability, especially for neurodiversity. We need to acknowledge that what is leisure for one person might be sensory overload for another.
Absolutely. Thoughtful design in these spaces should include adaptability. Quiet zones for retreat, dimmer lighting options, varied texture choices. It acknowledges that different nervous systems require different inputs for genuine rest and decompression.
Despite being dedicated to entertainment, the sources suggest these rooms often hold life's heaviest silences.
Think about it. The silence after a fight, the loneliness of watching a party end, the emotional exhaustion after a long day when you just sit and process a loss or a fear. The living room is where the volume is turned off and the true emotional weight of life settles.
We've moved through the private and public areas of the house. Now we delve into the spaces we actively avoid, the hidden corners that tell the most honest story of all.
Storage rooms, attics, closets, basements are our most honest curators. They reflect past selves, uncomfortable truths, and decisions we have chosen to defer. They function as the deepest part of the home as a mirror.
If we return to Bachelard's vertical metaphor of the house as the self, the attic, often dusty and neglected, represents neglected ideals or archives, things we haven't looked at in years but are too emotionally significant to discard.
And the basement, down to the foundation, represents the subconscious, holding those buried fears, trauma, and uncomfortable truths, the Jungian shadow. What we store down there is heavy, both literally and emotionally.
The clutter itself isn't just a mess, it's a physiological stressor. Environmental psychology and neuroscience have provided clear evidence that physical clutter is linked to measurable negative health outcomes.
Research has shown that visual chaos increases the production of cortisol, the stress hormone, notably in women, and it decreases cognitive clarity. The brain is constantly having to filter out unnecessary stimuli, leading to decision fatigue.
So every object is a decision.
Every object you look at demands a tiny piece of cognitive energy, making the act of relaxing or focusing harder.
This is why stored spaces often become emotional mausoleums, especially after a loss. They are saturated with unresolved emotions.
They hold the objects that serve as tangible links in the process of continuing bonds. This psychological concept suggests that grieving individuals do not, and often should not, completely detach from the deceased. Instead, the relationship continues symbolically. Holding on to certain objects, a specific sweater, a collection, allows the loved one to retain a symbolic, positive presence in the survivor's life.
That's a crucial distinction from older psychological models that mandated letting go. The objects are not just stuff, they are vessels for continuity.
Exactly. And the architecture of secrecy-hidden rooms, crawl spaces, locked trunks, ignites our imagination. Symbolically, these spaces represent compartmentalization, the aspects of self or memories we keep separate, locked away from our conscious, everyday awareness.
And culturally, our behavior is striking. The UCLA Center on Everyday Lives of Families found that over 60% of U.S. garages are too full to park a car.
This is the result of what you might call difficulty with decluttering, being outsourced to the massive self-storage industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. We are paying others to hold our deferred decisions. And we see the same phenomenon digitally, with endless cloud storage leading to emotional procrastination.
So avoidance is a cultural phenomenon, but that contrasts sharply with how some cultures use storage.
Indeed. Consider the Jewish practice of geneza, the designated storage space for worn religious texts that cannot simply be thrown away. Here, storage is an act of veneration and respect. For many immigrant families, objects are not clutter, but a means of survival and continuity, a tangible bridge to a lost homeland or culture that must be preserved at all costs.
Moving outside, the yard is where our private world meets the public world, but the sources emphasize the yard as contested territory.
Property ownership is inherently tied to history and power. We have to acknowledge that the concept of private, fenced-off land in many nations is linked to the displacement of indigenous peoples and the racialization of land access through discriminatory practices like redlining. The yard is, simultaneously, a cherished sanctuary and a socially enforced fortress.
It serves as the transitional space, the buffer zone. The front yard is generally dedicated to performance, the stage your presentation of self to the neighborhood, dictating what you want the world to believe about your orderliness or aspiration.
While the backyard is the private retreat, it's where you can let the standards drop. The state of the yard, therefore, often reflects an inner state. A meticulously manicured front lawn might signal intense control, while a messy backyard might signal relaxation or perhaps overwhelm.
The symbolic garden is powerful across every culture. The word paradise itself comes from the Persian parading, meaning walled enclosure. Gardens symbolize the human desire for order out of chaos and a perpetual hope for renewal.
We see this expressed differently across philosophies. The austere contemplation of the Japanese Zen garden versus the perfectly symmetrical, irrigated beauty of the Islamic garden, which represents Eden and celestial order. There is a deep optimism embedded in the very act of cultivation.
That concept is captured beautifully by the quote, "To plant something is to believe in a future you may not live to see."
But the outdoor space is where we enforce boundaries, and consequently where conflict often arises.
Robert Frost knew this well. Good fences make good neighbors. Fences and walls are not just physical barriers, they define legal and social relationships. Those often ridiculous micro-territorial conflicts over property lines, driveways, or trees are actually proxies for larger societal tensions about autonomy, resources, and respect.
And every aesthetic choice outside has environmental consequences and ideological weight.
Such as the traditional American lawn.
The chemically maintained, resource-intensive monoculture lawn is often described as an ecological desert. It requires massive water usage and chemical inputs. The shift toward native planting and naturalized landscaping is an ideological choice, a preference for biodiversity and sustainability over an imported, artificial aesthetic.
Finally, just as the kitchen was the original hearth, we've seen the modern hearth move outdoors. Fire pits, elaborate decks, and BBQs function as outdoor kitchens and gathering spaces for ritual and bonding.
They extend the communal stage outside, though it's worth noting that the rituals around the outdoor grill often reinforce those traditional gender roles, assigning specific tasks based on outdated conventions. Even in our most relaxed contemporary spaces, the shadow of history remains.
We've saved the most critical and most ignored part of the house for last. We were talking about the system, the complex, invisible flows that determine not just how we live, but when we live.
The sources trace the monumental shift from pre-electric life. Before the late 19th century revolution led by Edison and Tesla, life was governed by the sun. People often experienced biphasic sleep, sleeping in 2 shifts, separated by a period of wakefulness in the deep night, often used for contemplation or reading by candlelight.
Electricity didn't just add a light switch, it completely reorganized society's sense of time. It enabled 24-hour productivity, consumption, and entertainment. It truly conquered the night.
But this shift was not without philosophical critics. Ivan Illich, for instance, argued that electrification industrialized the night. By forcing us into a single consolidated sleep pattern and making light perpetually available, we lost a valuable sacred darkness, a time for reflection and a natural break for the pressures of work and production.
So how does this complex, invisible vascular system actually function to deliver electrons to our smart devices?
It's a massive coordinated effort operating in 4 main stages: generation at the power plants, high-voltage transmission lines, substations where voltage is dramatically lowered, and finally distribution lines that bring power to your meter.
And it's all managed by organizations with these long acronyms.
Right. Independent system operators or regional transmission organizations, ISOs or RTOs.
Acronyms aside, what do they actually do?
Think of them as the air traffic controllers for the electrons. They perform a constant high-stakes balancing act, ensuring supply perfectly matches demand minute by minute. If demand exceeds supply even for a few milliseconds, the entire grid risks collapse.
And this invisible power has hidden costs that accumulate in our homes.
We call it phantom load. That's the power consumed by devices, TVs, chargers, consoles, even when they appear to be off or in standby mode. This standby power contributes to unnecessary energy expenditure and fuels digital insomnia, maintaining the blurring of boundaries between work, rest, and consumption.
We also have to address the issue of energy justice because the reliability of the system is not equal.
Access to reliable, affordable power is a profound global injustice. Reliability and costs disproportionately affect low-income and rural communities. In the U.S., blackouts often hit these areas first and hardest. Globally, over 770 million people lack any reliable access, which directly impacts everything from children's education to the ability to store life-saving medical supplies.
Symbolically, light is a metaphor for truth and enlightenment. But we have to question our modern relationship with the switch. Is the tactile ritual of turning light on and off being lost to seamless voice automation?
That's a critical question regarding home as a system. Does the push toward the smart home, where control is invisible and automated, actually automate us out of agency? When the system is entirely hidden and seamless, our dependence becomes absolute, and we risk losing the tangible sense of control over our own environment.
If electricity is the nervous system, water is the lifeblood. The journey of water from the natural source to our tap is a masterpiece of engineering.
It starts at the source reservoirs, rivers, or aquifers, moves to treatment, where filtration and disinfection processes eliminate pathogens, and then often goes to storage. Water towers are not just landmarks, they use gravity to create static pressure, ensuring every home receives consistent flow and maintaining an emergency reserve.
And for homes located downhill from those towers, what prevents the pressure from blowing the plumbing apart?
That's where hidden engineering comes in. Pressure-reducing valves, or PRVs. These are essential, low-profile devices installed to knock the pressure down to a safe, stable level for household plumbing, protecting everything from your faucets to your water heater.
And hot water is another triumph. We've moved beyond heating water over the stove to highly efficient systems, like the traditional storage tank heaters, the instant-on tankless heaters that save energy but have flow rate limitations, and the highly efficient heat pump water heaters.
Once the water is used, the quiet work of purification begins in wastewater treatment. After preliminary screening, primary treatment uses gravity to settle out the heavy organic sludge.
Then we get to the quiet microbial ballet in secondary treatment.
An excellent way to describe it. In this stage, specialized microorganisms, often in a system called activated sludge, feast on the dissolved organic matter. They consume the waste, effectively cleaning the water biologically. Tertiary treatment then polishes the water, often with UV light or chemical disinfectants.
This careful process results in different categories of non-potable water.
We have potable, which is drinking water, gray water, which is sink and shower drainage, safe for irrigation, and reclaimed water, which is highly treated wastewater. However, there remains a massive psychological hurdle, the yuck factor, to fully embracing reclaimed water, even when scientific testing confirms its purity.
That emotional barrier links directly to water's cultural meaning. It's always been linked to purification in religious rituals.
And the psychological fear associated with dirty water, driven by historical events like the Flint water crisis, is profound. It breeds mistrust and disgust. Contrast this with Bachelard's philosophical take. Water evokes dreams, depth, and flow in the psyche, connecting us to emotion and change.
But the sustainability crisis is the biggest threat to this system. Climate change, drought, and the depletion of major aquifers are turning water into a geopolitical conflict point.
It forces us to confront the stark reality that water is a precious, finite resource, a relationship we must manage, not just a service we pay for. The depletion of massive underground water stores, like the Ogallala Aquifer in the U.S., means we are borrowing against a future we cannot repay.
So what innovations offer hope?
We are seeing smart water meters that detect leaks in real time, green infrastructure like rain gardens that manage stormwater runoff, and future concepts like atmospheric water generators, which literally pull potable water from ambient air humidity. The future of home design must incorporate closed-loop recycling systems, treating wastewater on-site and minimizing reliance on centralized, vulnerable infrastructure.
That was truly massive. We started with the foundational psychological need for shelter and ended with the fragility of the invisible electrical and water systems. It is profoundly clear that every seemingly mundane space, from the attic holding our deferred memories, our mirror,
To the kitchen, acting as a communal stage.
to the water pipes that form a critical system, it's all packed with social, psychological, and historical meaning.
We shape our homes based on our needs and aspirations, and they, in turn, subtly shape us, defining our daily rituals and reflecting our deepest, most vulnerable selves.
The home is the ultimate mirror of who we truly are, beyond the curated surfaces. And as always, we want to leave you, our listener, with some provocative questions to mull over, keeping this deep dive going long after the credits roll.
First, when you reflect on the home as a mirror, what potential selves or unresolved stories are you currently holding onto in your storage boxes and hidden corners?
Second, considering the sanctuary of the bathroom, what stories would that locked door tell about how you truly feel about yourself and your body when no one else is watching?
Third, if you had to rely only on natural light at home, eliminating the system that conquered the night, how would your daily routines and sense of time fundamentally change?
Fourth, look at your entertainment rooms or your dining table. Does that space reflect the kind of connection and identity performance, the stage you genuinely want to present to the world?
And finally, connecting the micro to the macro. We detailed how water works in the home, but the real question is, how does water scarcity or abundance shape the way we live at all? Our economy, our politics, and our sense of security?